our virtual breakfast briefing. I hope you're all equipped with some home-cooked breakfast and a big vat of coffee. Today we are talking about international management expansion and growth. The topic was pre-COVID-19, but we've reframed it for the current climate, and we think it's going to be super useful for you today and with current challenges. It's going to be hosted and led by Andy Moseby, who is a corporate partner at Kemp Little. And we have 4 fantastic panelists joining him. Before I hand over and we kickstart, I wanted to just mention a few things that we're doing for our community in this time, this week and next. So we've actually created 2 new events. One is BIMA leadership roundtables. So they're taking place every Thursday. Tomorrow's is but we will open it again for the following Thursday tomorrow. So do be quick on that if you'd like to share your challenges and hopefully a few solutions too with fellow leaders. We're also doing a number of different BIMA Hangouts, which is where we provide experts around a specific topic. So this week, Monday saw us do finance, mainly explaining a lot of what the government are doing at the moment. We did legal on Tuesday, again, a lot around explanation of how we can take advantage of government offerings. This Friday, we have mental health and wellness. And next week, we'll be doing one on leadership skills, on HR and on new business and marketing in this current climate. So they will all be released tomorrow morning. So take a look and sign up as quickly as you can because they're proving very popular. Right, before I hand over to Andy, Ant, is there anything you would like to mention about the way the next hour is going to run? Anything about the format and questions?
I'll be super quick. Thank you, Ollie. Thank you to those that have attended the last couple.
I'll run through it then. So.
So no, thank you to those. There's a couple of people who I can see who've attended our last couple of Hangouts, but so it's the same deal as always. You have a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. If you can click that and ask any questions that you have, the guys will try their best to answer them. And this is supposed to be an interactive session, so don't be afraid to ask anything that you want. And yeah, keep them coming throughout the session because that's what makes them really special. So yeah, that's all I had to say. I'd like to hand over to Andy now so he can kick us off.
Thanks very much, Ant. Thanks, Holly. Thanks everybody for attending this morning. I think before we get started into questions, I'm going to invite the panelists just to introduce themselves. So starting first with Deborah. Deborah, do you want to just say a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, thanks very much. I'm Deborah Lynch-Doyle. I'm an international trade advisor, or using one of the government acronyms, ITA. I work for the Department of International Trade and another acronym for DIT. My role is to work with London-based creative and media companies, and I'm one of a team here in London who works right across different sectors. And also there's a number of ITAs all around the country, Northern Ireland, Scotland, right through the UK, who are all doing similar work, working with companies to try and help them develop their international strategy, helping to reach opportunities overseas, and helping to smooth the way in terms of international expansion.
Great, thanks, Deborah. And we also have Paul Stephen.
Good morning, everybody. So yeah, I'm Paul Stephen from Sagittarius. We're an 80-ish person agency run across 5 offices in 4 countries. That's UK, Ukraine, UAE and Sri Lanka. Here to talk about the exciting world and interesting world of operating internationally and growing that. It's one of those things that for us started by one of my ex-clients, if you like, going elsewhere. So most of our work that we do internationally started that way. And equally, the reason we're in a number of places is more about building out a team that could fulfill our requirements, really. And that took us to other offices in the UK, but also internationally as well. Yeah, so that's our kind of take on this subject today.
Great, thanks, Paul. We also have Dave Blaseby.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, hi, I'm Dave Blaseby. I'm a Global Business Director at Mullen Lowe Profero. So we're the CX and digital transformation arm of the Mullen Lowe Group. I guess the view I'll be giving you today is from a network perspective. We're part of IPG. We've got 14 offices around the world as well. And my background really has been a lot of focus on global clients. About 80% of my career has been on global clients, programs and products across pretty much all of the regions around the world. And I've also got, I also specialize in auto, financial services and tech, telco as well. So yeah, hopefully this is useful today. So yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Dave. And last but not least, we have Rebecca Crook as well.
Hi, so I'm Rebecca Crook. I'm Chief Growth Officer of Somo Global, and we are a digital product and experience agency, and we are independent. We're about 160 people, and we have 5 offices in 3 different countries, so the UK, America, and we've recently opened in Colombia. My role is obviously to help grow the company globally. And I also have responsibility for our UK clients as well. But yeah, keen to talk obviously about the challenges of growing and opening in foreign countries from a cultural perspective and an operational perspective. So yeah, looking forward to the next hour.
Fantastic, thank you. So I'll just I think Holly gave me a brief introduction, but I'm Andy Moseby. I'm a corporate partner at tech law firm Kemp Little. I also sit on the governance council at BIMA as well. Holly said that this topic was put in place kind of pre the COVID-19 pandemic. And it would be odd to then ignore that for the purposes of today. So I guess my overarching question to everybody, but maybe going to you first, Rebecca, is, does the current situation and the current pandemic put a bit of a halt to international expansion? Are companies then looking more insular rather than looking to expand externally?
It's an interesting question. I guess for us, probably like many of us on the call and many kind of people listening, with us being a digital business, obviously we're very agile. And I think the whole essence of remote working for us as an organisation, as an agency, hasn't really changed. It's business as normal. We're very used to co-locating at client offices for projects, working remotely. So for us, I mean, even this week, we had our all company Q1 update. We had 160 people on a Zoom call. So we're absolutely carrying on business as normal. I think for some of our clients, the adaptation to remote working, particularly in the financial services sector, because of systems and data and so forth, has been quite challenging. But we're certainly carrying on business as normal, and we're not seeing any projects kind of slowing up. If anything, we're actually seeing an increase in demand from certain clients, particularly in America, who are actually now using this opportunity, I guess, to get rid of the backlog and things that they've always wanted to get to do in terms of user research and things like that. So we're certainly not seeing anything slowing up, but obviously this is an unprecedented situation, and who knows how things will evolve over the next kind of couple of weeks and couple of months.
Yeah, Deborah, I'd quite like to bring you in here as well. Is that your view from the DIT really, that it's kind of business as usual a little bit in terms of the business plans and people looking to grow and expand?
Look, I think we're in unprecedented waters here, to be honest, Andy. I think that you can't underestimate the impact that this current situation, once in a 100-year event, is having on companies, because we're all made up of people, and it's the personal effect that it's having. So you can't get away from the fact that this is having, it's not business as normal from our perspective, and the government's efforts is very much being put into focusing on saving people's lives and, the really important things of trying to save the economy. However, that said, there is still an awful lot of business going on. And I think that there was a really good article that I read recently from Thrive Global. I don't know whether you've all kind of looked at that. And it was an article by Stan Crystal, who used to kind of lead the anti-terrorism effort over in Iraq. And he said, basically, inertia is a bigger threat right now than a few wrong choices. Essentially, what you've got to do is to see this as, for businesses and people working in businesses, is to see this as an opportunity to look at what you can do to consolidate your position and to be ready so that when the situation is over, and it will be over, you know, we will get to the end, we will, you know, see an end to this. At the end, that we will have done some solid work so that we can then, you know, move forward in a very strong way. So my view is that this can be viewed as an opportunity for companies to do some really solid work. Now, obviously, there are some restrictions. So we know that there's a lot of travel restrictions and, you know, for all the advice in terms of which countries you can travel to. And I mean, at the moment, there is a recommendation for no travel. Any travel advice you can find on the FCO website. There's some guidelines, and I can also give the link if necessary afterwards. But despite that, all I would say is that there are opportunities to be able to kind of look at markets, research, which is what Rebecca mentioned, and to look at your own customers to see how you can help them plan for beyond this emergency situation as well.
Great. Paul, you mentioned that you have a number of officers abroad. Is it harder now to manage those people that are working remotely in those places?
Well, ironically, I don't know if the timing of this call is good or bad, but actually operating international offices in a dispersed team is a bit like now everybody's having to do. We've had to come up with strategies and tactics of dealing with people who are not right in front of you, and doing things like regular Skype calls and having face-to-face stuff is how we've always dealt with our sort of dispersed wider team as well. But I mean, from a business development growth point of view, there's lots of things that we're doing now the same but differently. We're still getting RFPs, we've still got stuff coming in, we're still running our recruitment stuff, doing interviews, we're still running workshops, we've done training workshops, strategic planning round tables, we've done virtual round tables kind of like this. So some of the things aren't actually, what we do isn't really changing, it's just how we do them. But it is changing from a business development point of view, what we can say when. So, you know, we're taking the view that right now, this week, and maybe last week as well, being overtly salesy and trying to talk to somebody about their next digital transformation project is probably not the best timing, even though that's probably what you want to say. It's probably the right time to be a helpful agency. How can we help you? You know, is there problems? Talk to us, whatever, that sort of thing. But I think in terms of business development, it's business as usual for us. And in terms of the kind of messaging that we would really be focusing on around digital transformation and e-commerce and all those sorts of things and customer experience, this is almost brilliant. You know, this is the sort of environment that now boards who wouldn't have been taking a digital transformation story seriously will now be going, right, actually, you're right, we should be really taking advantage of this. So I think this in the medium to long term will be good for the industry.
Dave, just want to bring you in here as well. I wonder, is that something that sort of chimes with you? How are you seeing business development work in the current climate?
Yeah, absolutely. So business development is really interesting at the moment. I mean, actually, there's been lots of challenges over the last 2 weeks, and a lot of people sort of getting their heads around things. But actually, we've been relatively successful. We actually won a pitch on Friday, which was great. And we've been doing remote chemistry meetings for 2 others as well. So, I mean, I think, look, it's a terrible situation at the moment. It is a crisis around the world, but actually, I think it, you know, as Paul was touching on, it's good. It's good for our sector. It's making a lot of people focus on what they should be doing with digital transformation and where they should be going. So yeah, I mean, we've you know, it's been very positive in terms of the the discussions we've been having recently. I mean, I think it's interesting. I don't think we're going to quite get as many new business opportunities through over the next few weeks, probably. But at the same time, we're looking at new business and how we move it forward and look at the mid to long term, which I think has already been referenced on this call, and plan for that, and actually use that as a bit of a time to take a step back and reflect on how people are going to be feeling and how people are going to be interacting moving forward. There is a lot of, we're going to be looking at, I think, one of the areas we're already looking at, what's our plan for sort of events moving forward. And a big question at the moment with the likes of things like Adobe coming out and doing a summit and organising that, you're going, okay, so if more is moving to the web, what is the role of events and how does that play in? So we're going to see some quite interesting shifts there. We're still pushing on from this front. I think everyone's sort of trying to make the most of it. And I think we're also keeping a close eye on every single market. And looking at which regions are going to come out of this first and which ones aren't. Obviously, China's sort of starting to make noises that it's coming back. Our tech center, actually, which is about 600 miles from Wuhan, is all back working together. So you start to feel the sort of the culture picking back up, and that country opening up. And then I guess we're waiting and seeing what else is happening and where else we should be focusing.
Yeah, we were talking about this internally a couple of days ago, saying that really, because events have moved so quickly over the past week, that people are reacting and being reactive to the circumstance because you can't really do anything else given the speed of the changes. But now, even after a week, people are starting to think a little bit more about looking ahead a little bit of, we all hope this will end very soon, but what are the things and what are the benefits that will come out of this, and what are the opportunities that will come out of this that will mean that we can make all our lives a lot more efficient. So in taking that more to the long-term view, what did you think would be the kind of good advice to give agencies that are looking to grow right now? Is it wait, or is it sort of stop making that business plan for growth? And if it is make that business plan for growth, what makes that business plan successful? What sort of things do they need to take into account? Rebecca, can I throw that over to you first?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think as David kind of rightly said, the landscape of events has changed, and I guess will change even more. I mean, we've been quite focused in terms of, probably like many agencies, in terms of kind of new business and marketing strategy, being quite reliant in terms of speaking at events and using that as a lead generation tool. And I think probably what we're going to see actually is more focus and clarity over the next kind of 3 to 6 months of kind of what are events going to go back to normal, and actually is there a need, do we need to go to them? I think there'll always be that role for that kind of, when you're meeting somebody for the first time, you probably physically want to meet in person. So I don't think that will necessarily change, but certainly for us, we will obviously see how it plays out in our different markets, the UK, America and Colombia. But we will probably be reviewing our strategy and actually defining, is there such a core part of need for us to do events in the future? I mean, anyone that has organised events for your own kind of new business needs will know it's very time consuming and it is quite onerous. So, there might be smarter, more efficient ways that can come out of this for new business teams across the agency landscape in terms of how they work and how they focus. And I think just naturally, as people adapt more to doing exactly what we're doing today, it's actually far more efficient. You're not losing travel time and things like that. So I think actually, there could be some benefits that come out of this in terms of how we work and how we kind of put priorities on what we do with our time.
Great. And Deborah, kind of over to you on the same point, really. Is that the kind of advice for businesses, is to, obviously they need to make sure that that they're protecting their staff and doing things that are necessary in the current climate, but is it almost a place now to be able to take a step back and look more strategically ahead for the growth in the future?
Absolutely. I totally agree with Rebecca. I think that this is an ideal opportunity for companies to start looking at what they can do, and what more can be done for them as well. A lot of companies don't understand the amount of government support that's available for them. So, for example, many companies don't even know that there is an ITA network there, and what the role of the ITA is. Basically, our role is to basically help you signpost you to overcome any of the obstacles that you might have in terms of going into, you know, landing or expanding in a particular country, wherever that is. Through our commercial DIT commercial network globally, it means that virtually every country that you're going into, there's going to be some support that we can provide for you. So it might be that if you've been doing some long-term planning, that you're looking at certain markets, then maybe what you need to do is to get an ITA on board. You know, it's a free resource to be able to help you to start looking and exploring those markets that maybe you've been considering, maybe you haven't had time to consider in great depth, and to start doing some ongoing planning for that. Certainly looking at research. So there's an awful lot of online research which you can do to start looking at how well particular markets will fit your own particular business models. So it may be that you are already getting a lot of passive inquiries, or maybe interest through your website or through other channels, or have had interest expressed through existing contacts from particular markets, but you haven't looked at it before. Maybe now is a time for you to start thinking, maybe taking that much more seriously. And again, DIT can help you with that, because our commercial offices in all of the overseas markets are there to be able to connect you to the resources that you need, whether that's a local local marketing research, whether that's trying to do some local marketing calls for you, to set up some meetings, whether it's to try and overcome a particular issue. So for example, say a company that I'm working with may have a particular problem in terms of a bill that's not being paid. You know, now is the time to start looking at what we can do to leverage to try and get you paid. Those kind of things. There's an awful lot of government support, which is quite wide-ranging. One of the things that I might also ask is, how have you all undertaken an audit of your IP? You know, this might be a good time for you to start looking at what IP you have, and when you're looking at international markets, have you protected it? So it can be trademarking your name, it can be looking at any of those kind of things, and looking at your copyright. So reviewing your IP and making sure that that's all rock solid for any form of international expansion, or certainly if you're going into new markets. Also starting to look at the financial support that you companies may have. If you're looking at moving into or taking on projects in other markets, and the size of the projects are considerable, which might kind of make you think, well, actually that could pose a risk, then again, there's government support that can help you. So I've got colleagues who are in UK export finance, and their whole job is to look at financing terms for buyers, insurance against buyer default, capital loans to help you fulfill orders, so that you can undertake projects maybe bigger than you've maybe undertaken before. There's an awful lot of other overseas help as well that we've got. Sorry, I don't want to kind of monopolise too much time. There's a lot of overseas help, quite apart from our DIT commercial offices, the connections that we can make to local agencies, whether it's chambers, indeed kind of making sure that some of the events that we're hopefully planning very shortly, which are going to all be online. We've been all our one-to-one events, you know, where people would go to a physical location have had to be abandoned. So we're hoping to set up a lot of webinars, which will be covering a variety of things in terms of how to deal with international opportunities, and also maybe looking at particular markets, for example, USA or China. So there's a lot of support there, and very happy to connect people as necessary.
Great, thank you. Paul, bringing you in, I mean, the advice for people that are thinking about maybe looking again at their strategy and going for growth, you know, it's clearly something that you've done already, you've been there and done that. What are the things that made that work successfully? And was there anything that you learned as you've gone through that process that you wish you'd known right at the very beginning?
So from an agency's point of view, I've always taken the view that actually we're all the same, but we're all quite different. So as much as you know, all the agencies on this call are different sizes, we all sell a lot of the same things, and therefore it's always a question of fit for me, for an agency, when it's selling its services. So certain brands need a little 10-man agency, some people need a 80-man agency like us, and some brands need a 150-man plus agency or whatever, and the fit of the agency and the scale of the work that they do and the type of work that they do and the sectors they specialize in and the processes they follow, they're the right fit for the brand. So you're always having, marketing of an agency is about, okay, what's our proposition, who's our ideal kind of customer, and therefore how are we going to get to them. And going to an event and running webinars and things like that is all about how do you get that proposition, whatever it is, in front of the right person. So in this current climate where obviously we can't go to events, okay, we can still run webinars, but I think our challenge right now is we're going to have webinar blindness. There's going to be so many webinars, so much digital content. I mean, our LinkedIn sort of feeds are just going to be inundated with all sorts of good content. But as an agency trying to cut through that, that's going to be a real challenge. But I think from a business growth point of view, I think we've all got to take a step back and say, okay, this is how we did do things. This is what we used to talk about as being a really strong proposition for my agency. But now, is that the right proposition? Is that the right product? I mean, we're trying to work with our clients on, well, hey, maybe how do you need to pivot at this point? The way you've been doing things till now, maybe you should be doing them differently. You weren't selling direct via e-commerce now. Maybe you might reconsider that. How are you going to go in that transition from B2B, B2C? But I think equally as agencies, we need to be really thinking about, well, maybe what is our proposition right? Is actually, the old model, the way we used to obviously do people on site or team augmentation or whatever, are they right for what's going forward? So I think there's a lot of head scratching going on at the moment about not only how do we continue to reach our target audience, but also what is the right message right now. And that's what I said earlier, what we're saying right this week is, here to help, you're sorting your stuff out at the moment. You don't need to be pitched to right now, but in a week or two's time, once people have settled down and realize this is the sort of new normal, then we need to have the right message for that moment.
Great. And Rebecca, just putting the kind of same question to you really is, in moving to that international expansion, what are the things that you need to make that work well? And are there any learnings that you've taken from along the way that you could share too?
I think kind of understanding the culture of another territory, I think is really, really important. And how you talk about your messaging, your proposition, you always need to tweak accordingly for the market you're operating in. And I think also having people on the ground to help with hiring. I guess there's a couple of different ways in which I've operated in an international level, where either you decide on a particular market you want to go to. So let's just use America as an example, but you don't physically open an office there. And I guess the conundrum for many agencies is, do I hire some staff and do we go and look for an account to win, or do we wait until we win something? And a lot of it is down to the challenge of managing cash flows and operations and lots of other complexities that come into it. I think at SOMO, we were very fortunate in that we won business in particular countries before we opened up. And then basically we basically spearheaded and set up offices accordingly to service them. But I think in doing that, you get cultural challenges. And one of the things that we've done, and we've invested a lot of time and energy in, is making sure that we have somebody from our leadership team that's actually based in that particular territory. Because otherwise you just end up hiring a stack of people and you have no senior kind of leadership there. And we've kind of done things like, for example, making all of the meeting rooms in all of our offices exactly the same furniture, exactly the same colours. So actually we all feel like we're one organisation. We do weekly company stand-ups where all of the offices dial in. So we've really put the culture at the heart of kind of growing the organisation. I think that's really critical for growth. And as I say, just going back to kind of the basics, I think kind of in setting up an office in a new territory, we hired in externally kind of lawyers and accountants and got the advice that we needed for the right countries we were working in. I think to think you can do that from the UK and not have that local on the ground knowledge, I think is probably a little naive. And I think some agencies do get burnt just thinking you can just do everything from the UK, but hiring the right people and the key people at the right time in those countries, I think, is a key really to it being successful.
Yeah, and I wanted to touch on culture as well, because I think that is a big important element of this. We had a question in which I think, Rebecca, you've probably just answered from Lawrence Stucker in the audience, that saying that they're in an organisation looking to move into international markets. How important would the panel see it that you have people on the ground in the country as opposed to travelling and operating from the UK? Dave, if I could bring you in for an answer on that. I mean, how difficult is it to understand and kind of resonate with the culture of a different country if you are only based in the UK and traveling out rather than immersed in it?
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, I've managed global programs from London. There was part of my life when I traveled to Japan once a month and things like that, and actually managed a program out there. And it's great to have FaceTime, but working remotely, you know, with some of these clients, it can be very challenging and very intense. And you work a lot of weird hours, and you've got to look after your health as well with all of that. I mean, I think ultimately to build sort of longer term success, I do think you need to be on the ground with some sort of presence. And there's a few different ways of doing this, I think, really. I mean, for example, certain markets, it is hard to find the right talent. And I think the lesson that I've always taken, based on my experience and when we set up offices before, is just don't rush to hire someone in. It usually goes wrong and can leave you a little bit caught out. But there's other ways around it. There's ways of how do you transfer people that you know and trust to embed in the culture and work with new, you know, local hires that you've made to really bring the culture together and also make sure that the operation is working. When Prefera was founded, there was quite a big decision made by Wayne, who the Prefera business was always based out of London, and he made the call to go east rather than west first. So he decided to go to Asia. And basically the move he made there is he said, well, I've got 2 to 3 sort of, you know, good people supporting me here in London. I'm going to move to Asia. So he made the big move about moving out to Asia and setting up, starting with Singapore, and then to other markets, Japan, China, etc. So I do think talent on the ground is important if you're looking for longer term relationships and sort of a longer term commitment in those markets. You can get away with it on a shorter term basis if you're sort of dabbling or an opportunity comes up that you want to explore, but it's not going to be a long term thing.
Great. Paul, can I bring you in there as well? I mean, how important is it to embrace either the difference between cultures, or is it more around trying to establish one culture that fits everybody? How have you managed to balance that?
So there's a couple of things there. I mean, kind of asking the last question at the same time, really, I think it is really important that you've got somebody who you trust and is, you know, even when it comes to starting the office, you want somebody who really knows the area, knows the local landscape. You really do need a local lawyer, local HR expert who really understands the local way of doing things, the right way of doing things, local accountants. I mean, some of those you can do, some like an accountant, you can do with a UK based who's part of a network. So that makes life easier, but you really want a local accountant to understand the way the tax returns work, the way the HR, you know, their equivalent of PAYE or whatever it might work. You've got to have that stuff if you're going to start building a team. But actually, interestingly, certainly with our Ukraine and Sri Lankan office, there are cultural differences. I mean, Sri Lanka, they have very different bank holiday structure, their attitudes towards working from home, their attitudes towards sort of diversity, shall we say, are quite different internationally. So you have to kind of, you know, adjust slightly for those sort of things. But actually, most of those companies want to be like us. They kind of, and I know that's a broad statement, but if you're in Sri Lanka and you're part of an international company, you want to behave like you're part of an international company. You don't want to be Sri Lankan, if you get what I mean. You don't want to sort of just work in your local way. You're enjoying working with an international team, working on international projects. And the same would be said for many of our offices as well. So culturally, you've got to find that balance of how do you do something that's absolutely right for them and respectful and all the rest of it, but also involve them in the sort of wider international community that's at the agency. So, and in terms of then who should be on the ground and how much of it you can do remotely. From an operational point of view, I always say that even if they weren't to open out, every office sort of needs I call them mum. They need and this goes even if it's our office in Leeds or whatever. There always needs to be a person, even if they're not a line manager, everybody is there. Somebody needs to make sure that the light bulbs got changed and the landlords had their ass kicked because they haven't fixed the thing in the hallway or whatever. There's always a need for somebody to be a bit of a leader in one of those offices that kind of is your temperature test on the culture and how it's going there, whatever, even if they're not really directly line managing the team, because our teams are very disparate and we'll have different skills in different places and they'll be line managed from different parts of the world. But somebody needs to be your eyes and ears, and that needs to be somebody reasonably senior, really reasonably mature, and somebody you really, really trust. And that might be somebody you take from the UK or from your existing agency and transplant, in my opinion.
Thanks. And Rebecca, just a sort of add-on question from that. This is another one that's coming from the audience from Zoltan Vas. How do you pick people who will be on the ground and lead officers in certain countries? Because you need that cultural fit, but you also need somebody who understands the business, the HQ, its goals, has good skills, all the rest of it. So who is the ideal person to stop being the leader or being the mum in those kind of offices?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Paul said is really valid. Having that kind of eyes and ears on the ground is really, really important. One of the things that we did when we decided to expand into different markets was we actually conducted a kind of staff audit from everybody from junior through to senior staff of who might want to do a secondment and go somewhere else for a period of 3 to 6 months. So we had quite a good understanding in the agency of the people from across all of the different functions, whether it was engineering, product, strategy, client servicing, that actually would be happy to go and relocate for a period of time whilst we got the office off the ground. And I think what we found worked really well was actually having a balance of different types of people, so it's representative. So actually the ways of working of how we operate and run projects could be replicated in that market as well. So we had a combination of people from different departments and also different levels of seniority. We also, I think, as I mentioned earlier, we made sure that we in time would have a leadership person actually based in that office as well. And that was a strategic decision that we made that has worked very well for us. I mean, I've had a number of people from my team, kind of mid to senior people, that have gone to some of our other offices and they've gone for 6 months. And we've really kind of taken a rule of maybe around about 25% of the people will be from the UK. And then obviously 75% will be from the local area. And then we'll start to retract some of the UK people kind of 6 to 12 months in once the teams have bedded in. So that's the approach that we've taken, and it's worked really well. Some of our UK people have chosen that they love the new country so much they want to stay, and that's great. And obviously that's good for personal growth and development. So that's what we've adopted, and it seems to be working well, and we're obviously replicating that and doing exactly the same right now in Colombia. So I don't think there's any hard and fast rules. I think it depends on the size of the agency, where you're going, and parameters, but I do think it is important to have some kind of head office type people there, just to help with all the natural things like, you know, how you maintain your brand integrity, and all those sorts of things are really important. And if you suddenly get a whole team of new people in, there's no way you can replicate that. It's just kind of impossible, really.
One of the things we do is try and formalise, so it doesn't happen by accident, is try and formalise how often other seniors go to our other offices. So we'll just make sure, you know, if you get to a point where you're hang about it, it's 2 months and nobody senior's been to the other office, that's a kind of fail, you know. So we need to kind of almost diarise it to make sure that kind of doesn't happen. Because if you're in that remote office and you haven't seen anybody senior for 3 months, you're like, well, how much do they care about us?
Yeah. Deborah, kind of moving on to you as well. I mean, how do you advise people when they're dealing with not just the kind of some of the practicalities of setting up businesses, but identifying and making sure that there isn't that culture clash so that things work properly?
Yeah, I think culture is a big component in terms of the way that people are going to be, their expectations of the market, how fast they can start to get traction, There's two things as I see, one which is culture and two which is your market entry strategy, which we're kind of talking about here. Culture is fundamental. There is expectations that people can expect to do business in the same way as we would normally do here in the UK, in many Western countries. But there are countries where relationships, having a relationship, understanding the family, and spending time together is a really important factor. You can't go to places like Japan or to Russia without there being an expectation, and stands at whole parts of the world where they want to know more about you, they want to know that they can rely on you, and it's the long-term relationship that they're looking at. It's a matter of building trust. So the very much more transactional way of working that we might want, which is to go in, to present, might have to be tempered. So it's a matter of understanding that. There's a lot of information, a lot of advice given in terms of individual countries and cultures. And again, the department would be very happy to help, and our local commercial teams will be very happy to offer advice in terms of any particular markets that companies are thinking of going into. In terms of market entry strategy, I think that there's been a lot of really interesting comments made as an experience. It can be quite fundamental. Sometimes people choose a market simply because a client that they have already has an office in a particular market. They do some really good work there and start to understand that there's some potential. So that there's a matter of using that, those credentials of working in that market already to then expand their operations. It's a really successful model. And alternatively, the other end of the spectrum is that you're researching and looking at where the potential markets are without necessarily the experience, but wanting to, I suppose, take a punt in a particular market. Behind all of that is very much research and planning. So it's really a matter of making sure that you understand some of the logistics behind it. So, for example, I think, Rebecca, you mentioned America. It may well be okay for you to make the initial exploratory visits, but you've really got to start thinking about, if you're going to be going to America on a number of times, if you're setting up offices, you've really got to start sorting out your visa situation. The last thing that you want is one of your directors of business to be asked the wrong questions at customs going into the USA and be found to be doing business in America and be on a visitor and visas. So there's an awful lot of technical issues that you've really got to get right depending upon the particular country.
Deborah, we've used as well, I don't know if DIT still do it, there's services, aren't there, where you'll do the research for them. If you want to say, well, okay, what's the the scope of or the market in this sector, in this part of America or whatever, you guys do that as a service, don't you?
We do. We used to do that all within our commercial teams. Now we have got an agency that, for example, America would do all of that. So they can do things from market research. They can then make contact with certain companies. They can get you lead lists. So depending upon the brief that, or the requirements that you have, and it can be a dialogue. You can kind of talk things through and find out, do you want to just purely, say for example, again using America, do you want to just stick to the East Coast? Do you want to kind of do West Coast, East Coast, or do you want to do initial research to work out, where particular clients with particular profile are that you want to be able to target? What is it that you would really need to know for your particular company? Yes.
Great. Just a couple of questions coming in from the audience, which is fantastic to see. This is one to Rebecca and Paul. So Rebecca, coming to you, is why did you decide to go to the countries that you did when you were expanding? What drove that decision?
I've kind of worked in a number of different places over the years where we've kind of expanded. Right now at SOMO, our decisions are strategically being based on the fact that we've won business in those particular countries. So we've set up an office to service that particular account. We've also been in a fortunate position because it's always as everybody knows, with digital projects, a lot of them aren't retained and it's project by project basis. We've been in a fortunate position where we've had visibility of projects with over like a 2-3 year period. So that has allowed us operationally to set up a proper office with all the functions that you would have at your head office. So that's been quite a nice luxury. On other occasions over the years, when I've opened other offices, it's actually been, we've decided from a strategic perspective, we want to open up and expand in this particular market. So we're going to run on a skeleton staff and then try and get some new business from clients that are within that vicinity geographically. I think that's much tougher to do. And I think you need quite deep pockets to do that. It's quite expensive to go into a new market with nobody knowing the brand. You're a totally new entity, and keep that going, because as everybody knows, you know, it's 6, 9, 12 months longer to build a relationship from nothing to get those big digital transformation programs. So I think any agency thinking about it really does need to look at that kind of financial forecasting and what that looks like to effectively plonk 3 or 4 people somewhere with actually no revenue coming in to cover their costs. So obviously the first option is the preferable one, which is the position we've found ourselves in, is to win the business first. But obviously, you know, we don't operate in an ideal world, so you know, there's challenges either ways.
For me, I'll tackle this 2 ways. So there's 2 reasons why you might be in different places. One is about where you're selling to, and there's where you're operating, and they might not necessarily be in the same place. So for us, our reasons for being in Sri Lanka and Ukraine were actually both for the same reason, really. Just trying to get more of the right people with the right skills, and the lack of the skills gap, or the lack of people and the affordability maybe of that skill set in the UK forced us to look elsewhere. We chose those particular places because we had relationships with 1 or 2 people already there, or we were working with them. One of the Ukraine agencies, actually an agency that we started working with, and we ended up just acquiring them. So that was kind of why we're there, and that's because we're a big Sitecore agency. So that Sitecore had a development centre there, so they're all ex-Sitecore staff. So that's why kind of we're places like that, and Sri Lanka was the same, about getting more staff at an affordable rate, etc. Then on the flip side, then you're looking at, well, working in the Middle East or US. So examples in the US are more like where we've had UK, so, you know, ex-clients or whatever who've moved there, and now they're there and they still want to work with us. I mean, UK agencies, and I'm sure DIT would endorse, UK agencies are still really well, highly regarded globally. And particularly bizarrely for international projects. Why we're considered so good at international or multilingual, multi-currency projects, I have no idea, because actually most of us here can barely speak a second language. But nevertheless, we seem to be certainly better at it than the Americans are, and many other countries. So we get inbound inquiries. And going back to my point earlier about business development, because of the sort of work that we do at Sagittarius and the sectors we specialize and things like that, actually our clients from the Middle East have come to us not because we went there. They came to us because they wanted one of the best agencies who did that stuff. So they came to us. So actually, being you know, this age of globalization, if you are if you are marketing yourself globally and trying to make yourself good, be known in certain sectors or whatever, then it will come to you as well. So that's what's taken us to some of the international places and then we had to follow through, a bit like what's been saying. You talk to anybody who's ever got an international office, there's always a story. There's always either a person who went there or a client who went there that really probably was the trigger. And then it's for you to then look at it, well, strategically, is that a distraction, or is that something we want to do? Because actually, to sort of just do a strategy and say, right, we need to be in America, as Rebecca said, that's hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of front loading to get that off the ground, start the building of the brand, researching, and that's a very different proposition. Whereas obviously, if a big client takes you there or whatever, then that's a lot easier.
Thank you. And we've had a question in from David Moody as well from the audience, which is slightly off topic, but I think it's an interesting one. So, Dave, I'll start with you first on this. But David Moody asks, what would you like to see the government doing to help your sector over the medium term through the current crisis?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, right? I mean, I mean, we've obviously got a combination of factors going on here, haven't we? We've got a pandemic and we've also got Brexit coming down the road as well. So it feels like from a UK perspective, it's quite difficult at the moment. I mean, obviously, Deborah has shared a lot in terms of the advice that's going on, but I guess it's really just helping with, you know, hopefully the event scene does sort of continue to operate to a certain extent, to give one way in. But I guess it will be support in terms of actually having, you know, engaging in new markets and getting to meet a series of new clients in those local markets. That's the type of support which I think would be quite valuable. Potentially on a sector level as well. I think where you know, again from Profero, we've got expertise in certain sectors that we really lean in on. I think if it's being able to embed yourselves in some of those sectors and other markets more proficiently, I think that would be incredibly valuable.
I think that's the point, is that your specialism is how you get into another market. Otherwise, you just rock up in a new country. It's like, well, why should I work with you rather than one of the local guys who's already here? You've got to be bringing some value to that conversation. So if you're a specialist in a particular sector and bringing some to the, you know, value to the conversation, then that's got to be the way you would start, because you can't build on your local presence, because that doesn't exist.
And Deborah, just wondered if you had anything else there to add.
Well, I think that David I know very well. Hi, David. I think that there's a variety of help available from government. I think that it's down to agencies to make contact with ITAs so that you can start connecting with it. There's going to be, at the end of this situation, current crisis, that we will be resurrecting a whole raft of events that we will hopefully start to get re-engaged with. We're already working with a variety of trade organisations like BIMA, and I think that we have got a lot of support, which is a matter of working out what a particular company needs. You know, I think one doesn't meet everyone's needs. So I think then it comes down to a conversation that you can have with an ITA, which kind of says, right, our situation is, we're thinking of doing X. Our problems are here, but our opportunities are there, our specialism with this, you know, and it needs to be a dialogue. And then we can then tailor the support that is available to the particular client company need.
Can I dive in here, Andy?
Great.
Sorry. So I feel like I'm
sure.
working for the DIT here, or promoting the. So Sagittarius has been part of, well, it used to be called UKTI when it started. The UKTI Creative Task Force, which was the UKTI as it was called then. I don't know, it was a campaign really, I suppose, really about promoting creative industries, and that was everything from architects to digital agencies, product designers, and all sorts of things. And as part of that, I had the benefit of going on a few of the trade missions. You know, assuming this stuff, this is a temporary situation, and hopefully in a few months' time we can start doing those again. And that's what I'd say in answer to David Moody's question as well. Is actually the trade. If you're thinking about going to a particular territory, I'd urge you to go on the trade missions that exist. They're very good, safe environments for you to go. They're not that expensive to do. They will introduce you to that territory. They usually arrange loads of stuff about, just so you can learn about the local culture, the local practices. You'll get to meet people. They'll have lawyers and accountants and stuff, just giving you an idea of the landscape. They're really good ways for you to go and step. You know, if you think, even if you haven't got a client there, you think you want to go there, DIT as it is now, sorry, do arrange those things, and I'd urge people to go on them. I went to a couple. I went to one in the Middle East, and then went along to a trade show that the UKTI, as it was called then, did, and a year or two later then it meant when I got my first Middle East client, I kind of knew I didn't know it all in detail, but I kind of knew what I was letting myself in for. So that's what I would suggest.
Actually, can I reiterate
Thank you.
support what Paul is saying is exactly that, which is we do a lot of events and missions. Sometimes they will be solus missions to several countries. Sometimes they will be focused on attending a particular event. So with the Middle East, it might be in anticipation of, say, the Dubai Expo 2020 at the latter end of this year. Or otherwise, other particular trade shows. So, for example, I took a group of companies to MAPIC last November, which were creative companies going to a sector, it wasn't a creative sector event, but there were opportunities for creative companies to be able to, pitch and meet and network, which is what it's all about. So I would definitely say that picking up on what Paul has said in terms of missions and a whole raft of the other events that we normally do. We've also got a trade show access program, which is that we provide grants to help companies to attend certain trade shows overseas, down to particular sectors. And so we work with a number of trade associations to be able to offer grants to companies that are working with those associations. There's a link, DIT TAP programs, which you can look at. Many of the events at the moment are obviously postponed, but many will, be resurrected at the end of this current crisis. So there's a lot of events, missions, other activities that companies can link into and make use of.
Great. We had a question in from Lawrence Stockard, Deborah, around any schemes or assistance that's available through DIT or government for digital organisations looking to move into international markets. We're kind of up against the time a little bit. I wonder if it would be possible just to add in some links that would then get circulated if there's any information that, on those kind of things.
Absolutely. Rather than trying to give them now with such limited time, Andy, I'd be more than happy to put some links in terms of government support through to BIMA, for sending out to participants, if that would help.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. Thank you. And before I go back to Holly, because we are rapidly running out of time, just one final question that I'm going to put to each of the panelists, which is, if there's one thing that agencies could be doing to plan for future growth right now, what would that be? And Rebecca, can I start with you on that?
Yeah, sure. I think for me, given in view of what's happening in the world right now with coronavirus, I think for me, it's all about recovery mode. There's going to be so many companies out there that have been impacted and affected by what's going on, whether it's airlines, retailers, whatever. And I think that's a global issue. So for me, it's to be a true digital partner and work out how you can work together in collaboration to help them get their business back on track in terms of recovering. So recovery mode and your proposition being around services and products that can help them quickly accelerate to get back on track and get their staff back to normal, I think is key.
Great. And Dave?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting. Rebecca makes a very good point about getting companies back on track. I mean, I think for me, in some ways, it's starting to plan in terms of what the world looks like when we come out of this. Once we hit the peak, there should be hope at the other side of that and a sense that the world is going to move forward. So it's really started to think about how the world is going to change and also what that means in terms of your plans. How does the proposition that you offer an agency ultimately adapt? And I think also start looking at the companies that you want to target. It's something we do well at Profero, is we find clients that we want to target. We work out which model is going to work best for them, and we build relationships before ultimately engaging with them. So the future planning piece, continuing to look at that is important right now if you can find the time to do it.
Great. Deborah?
One item. I'd have to say to use the time well in terms of planning, doing research, consolidating your position, and contacting DIT to connect with ITA if you haven't already done so, because we've got tech teams, creative teams with people there who will hopefully be able to help you plan for the future.
Great. And finally, Paul.
I'll go in last. I'll try not to repeat what the others have said. I'll have to agree on all of them. But what I would say in terms of what you should be doing right now, and it's the easiest thing to do, is really work out what all your current clients really want at the moment in terms of your own survival and their survival. But in terms of business growth, it's absolutely trying to take a step back, look at, well, what is our proposition? Where's that going to resonate the best? If we were looking to go to this territory or whatever, is that really right? Is the time right now? And is there appetite for what we sell right now? So that's what you should be doing right now, is reevaluating what your proposition is and where that's going to fit in the market.
Great stuff. Thank you very much. And just leaves me to say thank you to the panel. Thanks to Deborah, Dave, Rebecca and Paul. Thank you for attending. Hopefully you found that interesting. And thanks, of course, to BIMA for hosting this. And back over to Holly.
Thanks, everyone. It was a really, really interesting discussion. So this session will be available on our YouTube channel. So please share and point people in its direction. As the panel mentioned, we will collate any links, any important documents, and we will send that in a follow-up email to everyone that has attended today. I would also encourage everyone to sign up to our Slack channel if you haven't already. If you haven't, please email anthony@bima.co.uk, who can then invite you. We have a specialist COVID-19 discussion going on, but we also have a marketplace, which is a place where people can start to share their resources, but also other opportunities that are available, that are so specific to this time. So lots of stuff going on there. And then, as I mentioned at the top of this, tomorrow morning we'll be releasing everything that's going on next week, which is looking like something every day. So we hope to bring you exactly what you need. Thanks everyone. Have a good rest of the day. Try and get a walk, enjoy the sun. It's looking pretty gorgeous out there. We have to take these small mercies. Yes, thank you. All right. Bye everyone.